students. I once again welcome you back to my new video session. So this is the continuation of the topic evolution. So in the last video of evolution, we had discussed about the different theories of origin of life. So two videos I have already discussed there. So first video is regarding the different theories of origin of life, and the second one is about the experimental proof of chemical evolution of life by Stanley Miller. So in this video we are continuing the topic called evolution, that is evidences of evolution. So today in this modern world everybody needs a proof, everybody needs a particular as evidence for accepting any particular theory. So for accepting the theory of evolution we also need a proof. So what kind of different proof or evidence we have with us to explain the theory of evolution? So here some of them I have written on the board, and I will one by one explain them very clearly. The first one is presence of vestigial organ. It's also called as atavism. Second one is presence of connecting links. Third one is paleontological evidence, that is evidence of fossils. Fourth one is molecular and physiological evidence which exists in different organisms. Fifth one is divergent evolution, which includes homology and adaptive radiations of organisms. And sixth one is about convergent evolution. So convergent evolution again includes a study of analogy. And last one is co-evolution. So one by one we have to discuss these all as topics here. So first one, if you talk about presence of vestigial organs. So what is vestigial organs? Presence of organs inside the organism's body which are of not any function now. So in their embryonic stage or in their ancestral phase they were functional, but as of now they are not functional. So such kind of organismic so such kind of organs which are present in the body but do not have any functions left, that is called as what you mean as atavism or presence of vestigial organs. We can give a lot of list of presence of vestigial organs. The presence of nictitating membrane. Okay, so presence of nictitating membrane in eyes of human beings, you can take example. Presence of coccygeal bones or coccyx, what you say. Presence of ab muscles or abdominal muscles, what you call as. Okay, then presence of what you call as body hair. Presence of body hair. Presence of what you call as mammae or mammary glands in males. Okay, then muscles behind the ear or ear muscles which we cannot move. Okay, then we have wisdom tooth. Okay, so wisdom tooth is also one of the vestigial organ. Then what you call as pelvic girdle in python, you can take pelvic girdle in python. Okay, there are so many. You can give a lot of list of atavistic characters. You form even appendix also, you can take example. Vermiform appendix. Clear. So nictitating membrane is a transparent membrane in eyes present in different vertebrates. It's functional moreover in most of the other vertebrates. In birds, if you see very clearly, there is a transparent membrane over the eyes below the eyelids. It's called as nictitating membrane. This nictitating membrane does present in our eye, but they do not have any function. They are vestigial. They are of no function left now. So presence of such vestigial organs is called as atavism, right? You also have coccyx or tail bones. Presence of a triangular bone in the tail part. Generally 33 vertebrae are there in vertebrates. Human beings have only 26 vertebrae. The coccygeal bones generally are fused into one single bone. Instead, if they were not fused, they would have been continued into a tail. So tail bones or coccyx is also a vestigial organ. Then if you talk about abdominal muscles, what do you say ab muscles? In films or movies you might have seen presence of that box like muscles on the stomach, which I don't have, but abdominal muscles are also vestigial organs. Those muscles are not functional in us. Then presence of mammary glands and presence of mammae, that is on the chest we have generally presence of the mammary glands. These mammary glands are not functional in male, they are only functional in females, right? Then presence of muscles behind the ear. Behind the ears muscles are present which are again vestigial in human beings. If you see in other animals, in dogs, cats, they can change the direction of their ears with respect to the sound and the direction of the sound. We can't do so. Some people stretch their neck muscles to move their ears. Movement is different and complete movement of the ear is different. We cannot move ear, we can stretch ears. That's what you can to understand. Wisdom tooth, 32nd teeth, or the 32nd tooth, which comes generally after 30 years of age, is called as wisdom tooth. Wisdom आता है कि नहीं आता है वो तो नहीं पता, but this teeth gives a lot of pain and it does not have much pairing on the other side, so probably it is vestigial in nature. Then if you talk about pelvic girdle in python is a very large huge snake. Generally legs, because of their evolutionary characteristic features, their legs have disappeared, but presence of the girdles are still seen in its skeletal structures, so it is also a vestigial organ which does not have any function. The limbs are reduced into two sharp what you call as clawed structure called as spur. This spur is used generally for exciting the sexual behavior in females by the males. Okay, so this is a characteristic feature of what you call as the python pelvic girdle, which is a vestigial organ. Now again, if you talk about appendix also, appendix is a small what you call as a sac-like structure present in the large intestine, the first part of intestine in human beings. But generally again, this was a separate pouch in other animals for which used to be helping in digestion of certain biological products. As in human beings, it is just a reduced structure. It does not have anything do anything to do with the digestive process. Instead, sometimes if some microbial infestation takes place inside the appendix, it can result into a infection called as appendicitis, right? So these are the list of vestigial organs. So presence of these many vestigial organs in our body is a result of ancestry from the primitive animals which had these organs in a functional type, or they had these organs in a functional condition. So this is one of the basic proof or basic evidence of evolution, we can say. Secondly, you can go to connecting links. A lot of connecting links also we can take here. Okay, you might have studied about the animal kingdom in your PUC first year. A lot of examples you might have studied in PUC first year. Okay, so if you talk about connecting links, a lot of them are there in what you call as non-chordates, like Neopilina you might have heard about. Then you might have heard about Peripatus. Okay, so Peripatus, you can think about this, right? So connecting links and living fossils are also there. Many of them are living fossils, like Limulus is one of the Limulus, or king crab is a living fossil. In plants also there are living fossils, connecting links, like in plants Gnatum, Gnatum is there. It's a connecting link between gymnosperms and angiosperms, like that. So connecting link basically means what? Organism which has a characters, general body characters resembling its own phylum and its next particular group of animals also. So Gnatum is particularly belonging to Gnatopsida. It's a type of plant. Okay, so this is a gymnosperm plant. Now this gymnosperm plant has certain resemblance with angiosperm plants. It has certain flower-like structures which are not true flowers, but they have flower-like structures. So now this is a characteristic resembling two different categories. Okay, so it is connecting the previous phylum to the next phylum. Same thing you can see in Neopilina and Peripatus also. Neopilina is a mollusk. Okay, so it belongs to Monoplacophora in phylum Mollusca. Because first if you might have studied very clearly, you can understand this. Neopilina is a connecting link between the what you call as Annelida and Mollusca, not Arthropoda. Annelida, the larval stage of Neopilina, resembles annelids. So phylum Annelida, giving a gap of Arthropoda, directly resembles to Mollusca. This kind of a relationship is called as connecting links. Peripatus. Peripatus belongs to Onychophora. It is a class under Arthropoda. Phylum Arthropoda, class Onychophora. Peripatus. Peripatus is a caterpillar-like animal. Now this is a living fossil also. This animal from billions of years, it has never undergone any modification. So those animals which does not change or does not evolve further are generally being called as the living fossils, right? So Peripatus is a living fossil as well as a connecting link. The characters of Peripatus are similar to that of the Annelida and Arthropoda. So its previous phylum is Annelida and its next phylum is Arthropoda. So it has jointed appendages like arthropods, but its what you call as body features are very much similar to that of the primitive group, that is Annelida. So now this is also called as a connecting link and a living fossil. If we talk about Limulus, Limulus is a very clearly living fossil. Again, it has evolved from billions of years ago. It is generally belonging to Arthropoda, and the class it is generally belonging to Arachnida. So this animal is commonly called as horseshoe crab also. It is a marine form of arthropod, but it has never undergone evolution. That means the organism which did not evolve from their ancestor, but they are existing now, are called as living fossil. They are living, but their relatives became fossils now. Are you understanding what is the meaning of living fossil? Is they are living till today without any modification. Such animals and such organisms are called as living fossils. In plants also, you can take examples of living fossils, like you can take examples of cycas, you can take examples of pinus. They too are also called as living fossils because they have never undergone any changes just from their evolution. Now, thirdly, if we talk about molecular and physiological evidences, physiologically and molecular level, there are a lot of evidence we can collect over here. Like basically, there are certain enzymes, certain molecules. There are different molecules we have similar in us, including from primitive. Okay, first we'll talk about paleontological evidence. So, what is paleontological evidence? Paleontological evidence means the evidence which we get from fossils. So study of fossils is called as paleontology. The branch of biology that deals with the study of fossils is called as paleontology, and study of animal fossils is paleozoology. Study of plant fossils is called as paleobotany. We have different fossilized records with us. The oldest of a fossil is of a primitive microbe-like organism which dates back around 3.8 billion years ago. It's one of the oldest fossils. So it looks like a coesurvate or a protobiont model. So this fossil is one of the oldest. Apart from this, we have a lot of fossils of plants, animals. You just remember what you call as the chapter here, trilobites. Trilobites are one of the oldest fossils of arthropods. You have fossils of mammoths. Okay, you have fossils of dinosaurs. Okay, you have fossils of hominids, our own group. Okay, so we have a lot of fossils of these all organisms. We have fossils of certain ferns, certain pteridophytes, certain gymnosperms, certain bryophytes, certain type of algae. So a lot of variety of fossils we have. So all these fossils, they have been studied for their presence of age, or what you call as carbon dating. There is a technology, there is a technique called as carbon dating, by which they can detect the age of a fossil, so by which we can understand in which particular time they were existing as a living organisms. So with the help of carbon dating technique, we have found out the what you call as ages of different organisms, and we today very clearly can say that this is a very most important what you call as evidence of evolution which might have occurred in this way, right? So most important evidence of evolution is we can consider paleontological evidences. Then coming to the next part, that is molecular and physiological evidences. Molecular and physiological evidences means what? We have studied DNA, RNA, what you call as biomolecules. Most of the biomolecules are similar in most of the organisms. They may be unicellular, multicellular, tissue grade, what you call as cellular grade, tissue grade, organ system grade. So from a complex organism to a simplest organism, molecular level of what you call as basic molecules is same. The cell structural formation of a cell, the components of a cell, the components of nuclear material. No doubt the arrangement may be different, the sequence may be different, but the components are moreover same. Now this similarity also is an example for molecular basis of evidence of evolution. Also we can consider enzymes, different enzymes in different animals. For example, one example I would like to quote here, the starch digesting enzyme called what you call as tyline, or what you call as amylase. Amylase is also produced from amoeba. Amylase is also produced in human beings, which is very similar in its action. It digests starch, and it's a starch digesting, carbohydrate digesting enzyme. So this is a similarity between a unicellular and a most complex organism, what we call as. Then divergent evolution, in that we come across homology and adaptive radiation. In detail I will discuss about homology and adaptive radiation in another video. Just I will brush up this topic here, and in the next video we will continue with the detailed discussion of what is divergent evolution, what is convergent evolution. What is divergent evolution? Divergence means moving into different directions. So due to different types of adaptations, different types of geological what you call as features, factors, there were different climatical conditions, different geological conditions, because of which animals evolved in different directions, which is called as divergence evolution. Divergence means spreading into different directions. Okay, adaptive radiation is very good example for divergent evolution. Even you can take homology. Homology is the branch of biology that deals with the study of homologous organs. Homologous organs means organs that are same in origin but different in functions. Okay, functional variations with structural similarity is homology. Its opposite is analogy, and what you call as conversion. Convergence means coming to one point, right? So evolution in one direction, but different organisms might have evolved in same direction with respect to locomotion, with respect to adaptations also. It's called as convergent evolution. Okay, so convergent evolution and divergent evolution, it's a separate topic. I would like to take a separate video session on this. So here I'm just putting the definition of these two particular topics. Last one I would clear here itself, and in the next video we'll continue with the divergent and convergent evolution in detail. So co-evolution, what do you mean by co-evolution? Co means together. So evolution of two different organisms parallelly is called as co-evolution. Now co-evolution can be explained in different with different examples, we can say. One of the example I have written it here is Madagascar orchid and sphinx moth. Its scientific name is Agricum sesquipedale and xanthopan. So xanthopan is a sphinx moth, and this agrarium is a Madagascar orchid. This Madagascar orchid is a flower which has developed a long type of a what do you call as a style and stigma with respect to its nectar production, and a tube-like structure is produced through which the proboscis of an insect can enter. And generally sphinx moth also has a very long what you call as proboscis to suck the nectar from this flower. So they are obligately related to each other. For this flower to be pollinated, this moth is very essential. So you can take example of co-evolution in this respect. That is, you can take Madagascar orchid and sphinx moth. You can take example of what you call as fig wasp and fig. You can take example of cheetah and gazelle, Thompson's gazelle. So Thompson's gazelle and cheetah, they have evolved in parallel direction. They have evolved parallelly. That is prey predator relationship we call there as. Okay, in animals we call it as prey predator relationship. A cheetah is also a very fast running animal. A Thompson's gazelle is also a very fast running animal. Both of them have evolved in such a way that they should chase each other in their competition. One, the gazelle generally is a small herbivore. Generally, it runs for protecting itself from the predator, whereas the cheetah runs faster to catch its prey. So this parallel evolution is called as co-evolution. Parallel means two animals are evolving parallelly in similar directions to either beat each other or to meet each other. So this is called as co-evolution. So with this I would like to stop this video here itself. I hope you might have understood very clearly about the evidences of evolution. If you have any doubts, you can post comments and I would like to clear them. And in the next video session we'll continue with the next topic, that is complete discussion of divergent evolution and convergent evolution. Thank you.